Welcome back to the Alchemical Life podcast. This is your host, Abigail Crow speaking. And I could give my whole intro, but I freaking hate it, to be honest. So I'm just not going to do it. We're going to get right into I'm a coach. I specialize in helping endurance athletes get faster, stronger, more resilient, feeling better for longer. And I love what I do. And I love talking about helping how the hell I love talking about this stuff to help other athletes get better at what they're doing, which is run and or bike or swim. Can't neglect the try, people. But today we're going to talk about really like what it means to be an unbreakable athlete. And so I think that I have like a full guide that I want to be able to give you guys at the end of this. So I'll have a way for you guys to get this whole guide and just have it with you at the end of this so that you don't have to be, taking notes or whatever, that you can just have it. Like it's just here. And in this, I just want to riff off of the guide that I have and talk about what it means to truly be like an unbreakable runner. And I don't mean that to be cliche or anything like that. I truly, the resilient runner just sounded kind of stupid. So I said the unbreakable runner. The truth be told is like running is really hard and it's very hard on your body. And I can't ever guarantee that you're just going to be feeling good when you run all the time. I've got athletes that'll come in with me and there's just weeks when you're high mileage or you've gone through a really hard training block and you're at the beginning of your taper and you're just wondering why the heck you even run in the first place and question everything. So there's some, you are breakable. This is possible. But I do think that it's important to do everything you can and take every precaution possible to prevent that from happening, to be able to run really well for a really long time. And so what do we even talking about here? What does it mean to be an unbreakable runner? I think, well, first, it's like most of the time when I see runners, when they show up into my gym, like they're already deep in this pain cycle. They're already so messed up. They're frustrated. They've been dealing with these nagging injuries for months, sometimes years, trying to push through, taking time off, getting frustrated, and just basically finding their way to me is kind of like a last resort. And so at this point they're really desperate, and oftentimes they're fed up already. They want to be fixed quickly. And when you've been dealing with a injury for months or years, doesn't always get fixed quickly. So and it doesn't have to be this way. So I think that part of this discussion is prompted from the fact that I really like to prevent this for future people. And part of it is just getting started before you feel the pain. And I know it's hard because a lot of people are motivated in terms of doing things that they don't necessarily want to do. They're motivated to do it by pain or some kind of, like the pain of not doing it is worse than doing it. And so I'm here to hopefully convince you guys to just do it and start, because then you won't have to be feeling like crap and showing up giving me an email about how you need help with your training. So I think this is the difference between reactive and proactive training, and that's what like the unbreakable runner is really all about. That's what this episode is going to be about. So the first thing is like let's identify where your weak links could be. So think about your previous injuries, think about your natural nagging pains as you get later into the runs or higher in the miles or deeper into the intensity of your training session. What starts hurting? What starts bugging? What seems to be really sore? Every runner has unique movement patterns, structural differences, compensations. But I would say that there are a few like common areas that tend to cause the majority of running related injuries. And that would be posterior chain, calf Achilles complex, and then hip flexor anterior chain. And why it's three major areas is because they're major areas. I mean, it's fairly comprehensive. So when you think about what bugs, nags, aches, hurts, actually has had injury in the past, let's look at posterior chain first. That might be like low back pain during or after runs, any kind of like recurring hamstring strains, tightness, any glute medius, so the side hip pain, or down the side of the leg pain, early, really like fatigue in longer runs, and then that postural, like that kind of collapse later in runs where you have excessive flare in the chest or a really, really big hunchback later in your upper back later in the run. So basically, is it really hard for you to maintain proper form? That's also going to be something that you will see with anterior chain issues as well. So, it's not necessarily one is end all be all. This is going to be your area, but these are just things to look for. And that posterior chain issue kind of shows that you might have some pelvic instability leading to pain in the posterior chain. And the calf Achilles complex, right? If you're dealing with issues there, you might have inefficient loading mechanisms in the calf and Achilles, creating undue stress in certain areas. And that would be like, okay, in my run, I get that Achilles tendon pain or stiffness, calf tightness or cramping during or after runs, any kind of pain at the attachment of the calf muscles, pain behind the knee. If you're even just waking up with morning stiffness in the Achilles or heel area, or you feel like your ankles just have no mobility, like you can't really, whenever you're trying to rock your knee over your foot, right, you're trying to drive your knee forward, you feel that heel wanting to come up because it just cannot get there. That would be a sign of ankle restriction. And then the last thing is going to be anterior chain, right? Hip flexor anterior chain. Let's look at that. So this shows that you'd be presenting with some kind of instability leading to, hip flexor pain. And so that would be if you have any kind of hip flexor or anterior pain during or after running. If you lift your knees if you have a hard time driving the knees up during sprints, or when you do lift your knees in any kind of drill or warm up variation, you feel very tight, loaded, a little bit of sometimes it's sharp pain actually. Lower abdominal discomfort's a big one. Any kind of excessive low back arch is usually an indicator that you might be dealing with some of those issues, or when you're doing those high knees, as well as the pain if you have any kind of hip clicking or tightness or discomfort there. So most people can identify with one. Some people it's going to be two. Some people it's all. Which if that's the case, I'm so sorry for you. That's not what we want. So now let's look into how we're going to solve this, right? What are some targeted strength protocols we can do? And if you are looking at trying to address the issue, these are not necessarily things that are end all be all. The way people move and the way the body works, I mean, the more that I learn about it, it's like almost the more I realize, God, I don't know anything. The human body is extremely complex. And so I'm going to give very simple things. And I want to preface with, it's not always a simple solution. So if these things do not necessarily work for you or they don't solve all the problems, that's actually fairly common. It's usually multifaceted in terms of the issues that you're dealing with. So some targeted strength protocols for what you're dealing with would be something like a single leg RDL. This would be great for the posterior chain issues that you're presenting with, or a front foot elevated split squat isometric hold. That's going to be a great exercise to do for the posterior chain. For any kind of calf or Achilles issues, any kind of isometric calf raise hold, not necessarily in a super calf raised up position, but actually stretching down in a dorsiflex position and then raising to about mid stance and either pushing into something or having a weight and loading it and holding that position. That's a great exercise to do. Seated calf raises are also great. That really loads up the soleus, which is a big stabilizer of the calf. So if you have any kind of hip flexor anterior chain issues, then things like Copenhagen planks will be great because the adductors are secondary. The adductors are secondary stabilizers of the pelvis, and they also help with loading mechanisms in terms of the low back and the hip flexors. And so it takes some undue stress potentially off of the hip flexors, and that is often what you'll feel when you have that hip flexor anterior chain pain. So there's the Copenhagen plank. That's a great exercise to do. And then standing dumbbell marches are great. Now, if you're dealing really actively with a flare up in terms of that hip flexor pain, the standing dumbbell marches might not be the best thing to incorporate just yet because any kind of lifting of the leg is going to hurt. But I found that the standing dumbbell marches are a little bit less aggressive than some other exercises can be when you're dealing with a flare up. And so being able to go really slow, controlled, make sure you're stacking the rib cage over the pelvis, which if you do get this guide, you'll be able to look at a video. There's a link attached to it. Or also if you are just listening to this now, making a note and watching it on YouTube, a lot of these exercises I have in my own exercise library. So you can look on my YouTube and they're in my exercise library already, or you can just search up my name with the exercise and it should come up. But yeah, the standing dumbbell marches, as long as you're stacking that rib cage over the pelvis, you should be pretty good going slow and controlled, even if you're dealing with a flare up. Sometimes if it's really bad, you might need to hold off for a little bit, but those are things that should help. So how do we start implementing these things? I think that's the hardest part for people, is understanding, one, what to do, and then two, how to implement it, and three, what to do if things go wrong. Well, I think I'm going to go to three and then get back to one and two. Three, if things go wrong, like really truly, if you're wanting to invest in your running, invest in a good coach. Find somebody who, understands your history, is invested in learning about you, is good at what they do, and specializes in working with people like you. Find somebody who can really take the time to sit down with you, and maybe it's just, write a one-time program, or invest in a coach to really walk you through and look at your movement and make sure that the quality of the exercise that you're doing is good. I know a lot of runners, it's very hard for them to come into my gym in the first place, because strength training is just not necessarily something that runners specifically, think about spending money on or want to, take time doing or invest money into. But I have a lot of athletes that have come into me, and since it's kind of like they're just clients for life, because they realize that in order to run forever, they also have to be able to set themselves up to run forever well. And that involves lifting, and lifting for running, which it looks different than just regular lifting, but they have to consistently lift across time. And so it's an investment where they're willing to make. But the way that the structure is set up in terms of what do I do, there are a few exercises that I gave you guys, and then how to incorporate them is often because of the lack of strength training that usually exists in a runner's program. You can do just 2 to 3 exercises, the 2 to 3 that I gave in terms of examples in each thing, depending on whichever problem you're presenting with. Also, if you do crossover and you do all of those exercises, they're not going to hurt you. They might still even help you, but you can incorporate those and just sprinkle them in at the end of your workout. So, and you'll get a lot out of it. So if you're at a place where you're running, ideally in a strength scenario, you're breaking it up with a few hours of rest after your run and some fuel. But if time is an issue, or you're not going to do it otherwise, then at the end of your run, being able to uh, do these 2 to 3 exercises and get a few sets in of each is way, way better than doing nothing at all. So I will go over the ideal workout structure, and then obviously if that fails, you can always do the backup workout structure, which is just get a few exercises in at the end of your run, and ideally you accompany them with your harder runs. So it's after a hard run, you keep all of your tougher stimulus and more load on those tough days, and then on your easy days you just keep it easy. On your rest days you keep them rest. But the frequency would be something like 2 or 3 sessions per week. If you're doing just 2 to 3 exercises at the end of a run, you could do these more than 2 to 3 days per week. You could accompany them with after an easy run if you really wanted to. But if you're only getting 2 sessions in per week, put them after a hard run. And if you're also only doing 2 sessions per week and you're doing 4 to 5 exercises, you're really separating it in terms of session, then you want to do it on your hard run days after a few hours of rest, after a few hundred calories of food in your system or drink. But the duration really honestly doesn't need to be longer than 30 to 45 minutes. Most of the time my clients come in for about a half hour to an hour, and you don't need any longer than that. I prefer that the the format goes as such. You're doing some kind of dynamic warm up for 5 to 7 minutes, whatever warm up you want to do. I love World's Greatest Stretch. I love Hip 90-90. I love being able to do just, kind of like a little bit of a rock back and forth of a hamstring stretch, or a lateral lunge. Those are all great little warm ups to do. Static holds are not necessarily great before a workout. Those are things you can do after the training session's done. And then after the dynamic warm up, which takes, no more than 10 minutes really, you can complete the exercises from that protocol that I gave, plus whatever compound lifts you may have that you want to include. And that should take no more than 30 minutes. And then a brief cool down for some mobility work. That's where I would do the static stretching. If you prefer to do static stretching, that's where you can also do a little bit of foam roll if you want to. If you just want to include it at the end of your training session, that's when I would sit down and put on my Normatec sleeves. That's when I'd go hop in the sauna. That's when I'm just like letting my body chill and getting my recovery on, is after the training session is done. So for the overall progression too, is how do we get into this and move into it well? Start weeks 1 through 4, like just making sure that form is good. Don't don't load it super heavy. If anything, start body weight. Master the basic movement patterns. Lighter quality over quantity all the way, all the time. So like you don't need to add weight, you don't need to add sets, you don't need to add a bunch of reps. Just make sure the form is really, really freaking solid and that you're very confident in the form that you're performing. I often encourage my clients in this for weeks 1 to 4 period. If I'm not working with them directly, film yourself, like literally film yourself doing the exercise and compare it to the instructional video of me that you are watching. And if it's similar or the same, then we're on the right track. If you're also feeling it in the areas that I cue in the video for you to feel it, then that means you're on the right track. Weeks 5 through 8, after that first month, and you go into that second month, that's when you can consider adding in some sets, add in some reps. You might be able to add in a little bit of intensity if you want, so load, but just maintaining form as you're accumulating more volume, as you're accumulating more sets, more reps. If you were in a place where you were already in pain, right? Ideally, this is preventative, but in this second month, this is now when you can start running. If you were in a place where you were already in pain, right? You were not running. You're like, F this. I don't know what to do. I need to start strength training, whatever. That's when you can start your return to run protocol, unless a doctor instructs you. Otherwise, I'm not here to get you in any kind of trouble. Okay. But hopefully you've been running this whole time and you've been feeling good. And now you're just feeling better. And then the third month is when we add a lot more intensity. So now once we have form really solid and down, once we've accumulated a little bit more volume, now we can really start loading up on weight or resistance. You can also add in any kind of like dynamic alternatives into the workout. So instead of a calf raise, you might add in a calf raise plyometric exercise, like a bounce and extensive plyo. Instead of a isometric split squat, you might add in some kind of oscillation, like a deep tier split squat or a front foot or a rear foot elevated split squat plyometric. Again, these are all exercises that you can look up. A lot of them are on my own exercise library. And then you might consider adding in an extra training session, right? So this is when you could add in a little bit more volume. I wouldn't add in an extra training session plus a lot of weight at the same time, plus, adding in dynamic stuff at the same time. I would pick one thing for one thing at a time, whether it be now I'm going to add weight, now I'm going to add in a dynamic, a plyometric or a dynamic variation of what I've already been doing, or now I'm going to add in a third session into my training week. Those are all things that you can do in that third month, and then in that obviously fourth month and beyond. Just maintaining those sessions, begin adding in, if you added in one thing and not the other two, you can start adding in those other couple of things from the month 3 suggestions, or you can also rotate just your areas of focus. So if you were really focused on the posterior chain stuff and now you might feel like you want to focus a little bit more on the anterior chain stuff, you can. If you're really focused on the anterior chain stuff and you want to work a little bit more on the calf stuff, then these are all things that you can begin alternating and rotating through. I really personally believe that you'll be able to do all those things and be able to work on every area that you need to as your week allows. But if again you're somebody who's just like, I'm only going to do probably 3 exercises a couple times a week and I just need to focus on one thing at a time, then that's when in that 3 to 4 month mark you can start really rotating overall areas of focus depending on how your training's going, what areas are fatigue, where you are in your build phase, where you are in your racing season, that kind of thing. And as you integrate with run training, again, ideally you're running this whole time and we're doing this preventatively and you're already just an unbreakable runner. But strength work, right, it doesn't exist in isolation. And so, it's got to complement your running. So I think that if you're starting from a place of I'm not running anymore, how do I begin running again? That second month is when I would start running. But that's when I would make sure you have your one. Start with just adding in a couple of easy days and make them in quote quality days, but make them easier in the sense that the intensity is still a little bit lower. So volume and intensity is pretty low. Begin then incorporating more volume slowly. And then after you've incorporated a little bit more volume, because that's oftentimes the big issue in terms of pain, volume is what's going to get you. If you're good on the volume and you've slowly started integrating more volume, like 10% each week, then you can add in some intensity to your training sessions and really make those quality sessions quality and make those keep the easy miles easy. But I think that to structure your training with your lifting so that let's say you're back to a place of running and you're not feeling pain, is you have to make sure that in whatever cycle of training you're doing, you're giving yourself weeks for easy, and you're giving yourself weeks for hard, and you're giving yourself weeks for peak, and you're giving yourself weeks to taper, right? So like you need to have in your season rest weeks, or very, very easy weeks. You need to have in your season building weeks where you are slowly adding in volume, adding in intensity. You're going to have in your season peak running weeks where things are just like, how in the F, this is so hard. This week is so treacherous. I could not keep up this volume and this intensity. And it's because you could not. That's why it's peak. And then you need to have tapers in your running where you are slowly decreasing in volume, but you're maintaining some intensity. You have shorter focus sessions so you're not having excessive soreness. Those are all things that are really important in your running career to have. And if you're thinking right now, I don't have any structured strength training and I don't have any kind of structured running block, those are things that I would sit down and really figure out for your season, because without them, I really don't think that you're going to have as successful a season as you'd like. Even if you do this for fun and you're just a hobbyist that likes to compete and push yourself, like if you want to do the best for yourself, you really need to set yourself up for success. And that's going to be making sure you have somewhat of a program that you're following. So if you need to invest in a run coach, if you need to invest in a strength coach, take the time, spend the money. It's really, I promise you, it's worth it. With my running, I invested in a run coach. I'm lucky. I am a strength coach, so I've got that down. But I've also invested actually money in other strength coaches to learn from them and learn from their programming. That's neither here nor there. But anyways, I think that it's really important to spend the money where it's going to benefit you to become the absolute best that you can be. And so in order to become an unbreakable runner, you have to understand that you are in fact somebody that can break, and you have to treat yourself as somebody that needs to have structure to your training, whether it be hard, rest weeks, taper weeks, deload weeks, time off, a scheduled vacation, whatever it is. You will have fewer injuries and mystery pains. You're going to have way better running economy. You're going to have better endurance later in your runs. You're going to have more confidence in your body's ability to get through your training blocks, because you'll know when you have hard weeks and that you'll have easy weeks coming up. You'll also know that your body, the strength that you've built through this, is going to have improved your overall resilience, and stability. And you're going to have faster recovery between your hard efforts, so that whenever you do take a taper week or you do take a deload week, you're really ready to go when it's time to push. And you're just going to have more long uninterrupted training blocks, so that whenever you do go into your long training block that you have scheduled out for yourself, you're going to be able to handle the volume that's in front of you. You're going to be able to handle the intensity that's in front of you. Really, truly, you want to be proactive, instead of reactive with your training. So if you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. My Instagram is going to be below. I think my email below as well. And so I love that I don't even know what fucking socials I put out there, but just please reach out to me if you have any questions. And if you do want this guide like that I have, that I've kind of been doing my notes off of, message me, Unbreakable, DM me, do it in my Instagram DMs. Because to be honest, I'm trying to figure out how to do automation so that I can get everything sent out really quickly for you guys. So it's in my Instagram DMs. Direct message me the word Unbreakable, and I should, hopefully, technology will help me out, be able to send you over a full thing. So working out the kinks on that. I am so not tech savvy. Worst case scenario, I will eventually get back to you, and I will respond to you, and I will send you the pamphlet. It just might not be as quickly as as technology should be. Anywho, if you have any questions, please reach out to me. Feel free to comment stuff, like leave a comment asking about stuff, or comment any kind of success you might have had with strength training, or success you've had with actually scheduling a running block. I really do like hearing from you guys. I like learning from you guys, and it helps me become a better coach, and also helps me as an athlete whenever it comes to my own running and my own training. And it's very relatable, because I often too, make the same mistakes in my runs that you guys do, in terms of thinking that I'm Superwoman and that I can handle a lot of volume when I cannot. So, you just engage with me. I like talking to you guys. And next week, we have a super, super special guest on. We have Steph Lyles on. She's been a longtime client of mine, an absolutely incredible runner, and she has gone from a place of feeling totally broken, presenting with quite a few of the instabilities that I mentioned today, and from going from not really able to run and feeling super down to just absolutely winning race after race after race and coming back as an athlete stronger than she has been in really truly decades. She's starting to hit times and get times similar to that when she was in her 30s, and so it's just really freaking cool to see. Anyways, absolutely awesome episode coming up next week. It's audio only, but it will still be out on YouTube, and I hope you guys enjoy. So until then, I will see y'all next week, and stay unbreakable.